Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the executive editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club, as well as our new Girlfriend Social Club. So the more than 100,000 members of the Girlfriend Book Club chose as our July pick The Story She Left Behind. And as always, you guys pick so well. It's an amazing read. It's one of my favorite books of the last couple of years. I read it in a weekend. And we're so happy to be joined tonight by New York Times bestselling author Patti Callahan Henry. So welcome, Patti.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. So I'm not going to start by making you relay like what the book's all about, because I think a lot of people everybody watching this has probably read it already. But I did want to start out by asking you about the inspiration behind the book. And I know that you were inspired by the real life mystery involving Barbara Newhall Follett. So and that's in your author's notes at the end. So can you just tell us a little bit about what inspired this book?
Absolutely. First, let me say I'm so happy to be here with your book club. And I am looking at that wildflower field behind you. And I'm like, did we just get dropped into the setting of my novel? Hello back there.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful. So this is one of my favorite subjects, which is, where do ideas come from, right?
Mhm.
What is this nebulous place where we as creatives decide to make something out of nothing, out of a mere idea? So all of my novels have come from different places, but I can tell you exactly when I knew that I wanted to write this novel. I actually thought I was going to write a novel about Beatrix Potter.
Right.
And I was doing some research on her, and I discovered that when she was a young child, she created a coded language to keep her parents from reading her diary.
Which is so
And it's
fascinating.
fascinating. I bet 90% of the people here had never knew that unless they read my author note.
Yeah.
And so I started doing research on women authors who make up languages, because I started thinking, why would anyone make up a language? And I discovered Barbara Newhall Follett. And when I did, I got that thing, that chill down the back of my neck, down my arms. And Barbara Newhall Follett is a cold case literary mystery, an author disappearance that has never been solved. She was a child prodigy born in 1914. She published her first novel when she was 12 years old.
Mm.
It was called The House Without Windows. It was a children's fantasy novel. And her life fell apart after that. And she also created a fantasy world and her own language. And by 27, 28 years old, she was married. And her husband admitted he was having an affair. They got into an argument, and she walked out the door of their Brookline, Massachusetts apartment and was never seen again.
Wow.
And all of her work, including the language she created, sits in 16 boxes at Columbia University, just gathering dust. And I wanted to know who she was and what happened to her. And because her mystery was never solved, I fictionalized her life. My character's name is Bronwyn, because I didn't want to give a fake ending to a real person.
So how did you hear about that first, that mystery? Where were you when you found out about that?
I was at home just doing research on, good old Google, like authors who made up languages.
Wow.
And I found an article about her in this quarterly called the Latham Quarterly. And this man had written this, he actually was on NPR, actually also heard it on NPR. He wrote this long, lengthy piece about her that was so fascinating. And I found myself not skimming as I usually do when I'm looking at things. And I printed the article, I read the article, I was marking it up, and I thought, if I'm this interested in this, there's something in here. Now, it took me a while, Shelley, to know what it would become. I actually spent an entire year writing almost a year, writing a novel about her, and then having to fictionalize it. So, um, like I said, it was mostly because I had grown to love and respect her, and I didn't want to give her a made up ending.
But originally, so you said Beatrix Potter, which we learned in your author's notes, also created her own language. So originally you were going to write a book about Beatrix Potter. Is that right?
Right. So Beatrix Potter fascinates me. And so I started really diving into her life. I started writing a novel about her. And then I ran across that fact that she had. So Beatrix Potter lived in Victorian England, and
Hmm.
her parents were very strict Victorian, upper class family, both of them. And all they wanted for her was to dress well and marry well. And she was this wild little girl who was making up stories and gathering things from the woods and bringing home mouse skeletons and flowers and turning her bedroom into a mausoleum, like a little museum of the natural world. And in doing so, um, she didn't want her parents to know what she thought about their life. And what was really fascinating to me is that she made up this coded language, right? Then I start studying Barbara, and both of them were bucking against the norms of society.
Hmm.
So Beatrix lived way before Barbara. Barbara was born in 1914. So
Hmm.
they overlapped a little
Hmm.
bit, but of course they would have never met Massachusetts and England.
Right.
But they both were living in a time where what they wanted to do was not expected of them. And it really caused a lot of problems. Now, Beatrix moved to the country and really made a life for herself, really forged her own path, where Barbara never did.
Mm. So also, I know that you wrote about the Great Smog of London, and that sent Clara and Winnie to the Lake District. Did that actually happen? That Great Smog? Is that
Oh,
from true history?
so I always say that setting not only should feel like another character, but I want my setting to be so important that if I pulled my story out of that setting, it wouldn't be that story, right? That you wouldn't be able. I don't want you to pull my story out and put it in anywhere England or anywhere USA. I want you to be so I want this setting to interact with the story. So the Great Smog of 1952 was the greatest natural disaster in England at the time. It was over 4 days in December when pollution and smog and fog uh, descended on the city of London and sat there for 4 days. And it was sulfuric and it was poisonous and it was a green fog and it was dangerous. And thousands of people died
Hmm.
over those 4 days. And they say later tens of thousands of people died because of the damage that was done to their lungs. And this was fascinating to me that I didn't know that much about it. The first time I'd ever heard of it was when I was researching my novel, Becoming Mrs. Lewis, which is about C.S. Lewis's wife. And there was a weekend in 1952 where she left London for the weekend because of the bad smog and went to Oxford. And then the second time I heard about it was on The Crown.
Mm.
And so then I dove, as I do when I'm curious about something, I just dove down the research rabbit hole and knew that this was one of the obstacles that my Clara and Winnie would have to overcome because Winnie was born early.
Mhm.
So she has these little Coke bottle glasses and fragile lungs. And
Yeah.
I knew that she would be in danger. And so Clara, who's trying to be a better mother than the mother who left her, ends up putting her own child in danger. And I wanted that kind of push and pull, that juxtaposition between I'm a better mom, but look what I've done.
So I always ask this, was there a particular chapter or character or scene that was really more challenging to write than the others in this book?
Oh gosh, what a great question, Shelley. Um, I think the most I'm trying to think of one without like giving a spoiler.
That's okay. Don't worry
I
about it.
I think one of the most challenging for me was the scene where she discovers what happened to her mother. I was trying to
Mm,
say it without giving it away. So there's this scene where it hits her
right.
and she discovers what happened to her mother. And that scene for me was full of so much emotion, right? Like it was so overwhelming to me that but I couldn't just write, and she was overwhelmed and cried. Right?
Right.
There had to be a processing of it, and I think the chapter before, during, and after that were rewritten loads and loads of times.
So you said it took you about a year to write this. Is that correct?
Oh, well, it took me 2 because the first year I spent writing, only about Barbara. Like I wrote it as a biofiction kind of novel, much like my novel Becoming Mrs. Lewis, which is about a real person, but fictionalized. I was doing the same thing with this until I realized that I wanted to fictionalize it. So
So
then I had to start over.
So it was about 2 years it took you to do
Yes.
this. Because I
Yes.
was gonna ask you about how you did your research for this book, and also how did you choose South Carolina? I understand why you chose the Lake District in
Yes.
London, but how did you choose South Carolina as being another setting in this book?
So the reason I chose South Carolina is I wanted to give, so the real Barbara and my Bronwyn's life split at about 20 years old,
Right.
where I give my character, Barbara never had a happy marriage or really a happy life. It was actually a really sad, when I was writing the book just about her, it was really sad, Shelley. Like I was very deeply sad. So I wanted to give Bronwyn this slice of happiness. So I have her fall in love, get married, have a daughter she adores and loves and is creative with, and have them move to a small town. So I have spent the last 20 years of my life. We have a small place outside Savannah in Bluffton, South Carolina. It's where my kids have grown up for their summers. It's where my boys know the waterways better than the roads. And it's a place that is very grounding to me and very stable. And much like the Lake District, feels very mystical. And
Right.
I wanted to draw these parallels between the place that Bronwyn moved at when she was happy and maybe the place that we end up in the novel, which is the Lake District.
Mm.
They both have this, what the Irish call a thin place feel, where the seen and the unseen feels very close together.
So are there other authors besides Beatrix Potter, who have created their own language? I'm just curious. What did you discover?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien created Elvish, of course, for Lord of the Rings. C.S. Lewis made up a couple words for Narnia, not a whole language. Madeline L'Engle made up a couple words. Dr. Seuss has created some words, one that has even entered our lexicon of language, which is nerd. Um, Lewis Carroll wrote that funny poem Jabberwocky and created a whole bunch of nonsense words, one of which has entered our language, which is chortle. So yes, there have been many authors who have created languages, very few that have created an entire language like
Right.
Elvish. I know George Martin created a language I can't pronounce. I think it's Duthkari or something like that. But yeah, and it's usually in the realm of a fantasy novel that authors, create these kind of languages. But
So if somebody is this book, the story she left behind, this is their first taste of Patty's books. Can you advise them, like if they want to read one of your previous, was it 17 novels,
yes.
like which one they might want to pick up next if they're not familiar with your work yet?
After you've read this one, just work your way backwards from there. So the one before this is called The Secret Book of Flora Lee. You can
Okay.
see it right there. They have a similar resonance and feel. They're both set in the countryside of England. Before that was another book set in the countryside of England called Once Upon a Wardrobe. There's Becoming Mrs. Lewis. Surviving Savannah is set in Savannah and it's about a lost to time shipwreck. So I would start there in that realm of books.
Do you remember everything from the previous 17 books that you've written? I'm just curious.
Oh, heck no. No, I remember the last, like, I can talk pretty intelligently about the last 6 or 7, and then it gets
I
fuzzy.
would imagine. Yeah.
I can talk a lot about the first one that came out in 2004. But after that, and I know the plots, but the names of the characters and the details, they get a little fuzzy.
So I did ask the Girlfriend Book Club members what they would want me to ask you.
Oh, good.
And this is what they said. Do you think English does not have enough words in it to describe everything that we need to talk about?
That is a really interesting question because when I was doing my research on language, I was trying to figure out why Barbara made up this language. And we know why Tolkien made up a language. He tells us why. He was obsessed with language. He was a linguist and he was a mythologist. Like he studied mythology and he wanted to create this language. And he wrote the book so that he'd have a language to put in it. It wasn't the other way around. And the more I studied Barbara and read her biography, which was written by a psychiatrist, and really looked at her life, I believe that the reason Barbara made up a language is because she just felt like English didn't have the right words for how she felt, and also not the right words for how the natural world made her feel. And I've studied the Gaelic language a little bit, like not enough just enough to be dangerous. And during COVID, I tried to teach myself Gaelic.
Oh, good.
It did not go well. So there's this sensibility around the Gaelic language that's similar to Barbara's, I think, impetus for creating, which is, for example, in Gaelic, there's 35 words, I think, for field.
For
Just
field.
for the word field. We have field.
Field.
And so there's this sensibility in that language that nature needs a lot more words than we have. And I think that's part of what Barbara was doing, because when you look at her language, so much of it has to do with emotions or the natural world. And she didn't feel, I believe, that English had the right words for these kinds of things. Like, I want the sky to break open or a shadow across the moon. She was making up words to describe these kinds of things.
So someone wanted me to ask you, what is your daily writing routine like? Do you get up at, I don't know, do you write from 9 to 5? Do you write a couple hours a day? Or what's your writing routine like?
When I'm home, which I haven't been since March, I'm home today. I'm so happy. I'll be back at my writing desk tomorrow morning for the first time in months because my book came out in March and I have been on the road. I have been from California all the way to the East Coast, all the way down the South, all the way up to New Jersey. I've been to Nantucket and Massachusetts, and I am now home. So when I'm home, I started a routine when my kids were very young. When I first started writing, I needed to get up before them if I was going to write. So I would write from 4:30 to 6:30 in the morning. And that has changed. Now I write from 5:30 to noon, right? So I got in the habit of early morning writing. And if there is a muse, she only shows up if I sit my butt in my chair and put my fingers on the keyboard or my pen in my hand. And for me, those morning hours are sacred. So when I get up tomorrow morning, I will do my very best not to check my email, not to check my social media, and go dive straight into my work. Well, with a cup, like I'll have made the coffee. But other than that, I try to do it very first thing, Shelley, very first.
So, of course, everybody wants to know, what are you working on next? What's coming up?
All right. I am so excited about the book I'm working on. It's so much fun and so scary a little bit. So let's see if I can figure out the best way to talk about it because I'm not even finished. But it is the story of a 14-year-old girl named Emma and her mother, Jenny, who in 1972 go to the North Carolina mountains to spend the summer so the mother can teach at a school that needs help.
Okay.
And the young girl, Emma, goes on a youth group retreat, camping retreat, and is accidentally abandoned and forgotten during a hiking trip.
How did you come up with that idea?
I love your face. So, she has no survival skills. She's in the Nantahala National Forest. She's 14 years old. And we also see the mother's point of view, who is in this town for reasons she has not told her daughter. And these two things collide. And Emma's survival with a bagged lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, and a poncho, both harrowing and mystical, also expose a town secret. So there's a few stories colliding at the same time. How did I think of it? I think it was a combination of two seeds that grew into this hybrid tree. One is about 13 years ago, 12 years ago, I had a terrible hiking accident.
You did.
I did. I love hiking and I love the woods. And I was in Tennessee at a writer's colony and I went hiking and I fell and I was alone and I had my phone. And I often think about, but I had to be rescued. It was called a high angle rescue. They had to get ropes. And I often think about what would have happened if I hadn't had my phone. It was the fall. It was late afternoon. It was getting dark. It would have gotten dark very fast. It was getting dark when they finally found me. And so I think about that a lot. And then I read this article about, have you ever heard of Julian Kopecky?
No.
She is this woman. Now she's a woman, but when she was 14 years old, she was on a plane flight with her mother on her way to to visit their father in the Amazon forest. And the plane crashed and Juliana was the only survivor. Her seat like popped out of the plane and floated down and landed. And Juliana woke up strapped in her airplane seat and everybody else was dead. And she survived 14 days in the Amazon rainforest. And I read that and I thought, an hour. That's how long I would make it.
Yeah.
1 hour. Broken collarbone, Amazon rainforest. I would do something stupid within the hour. And her parents mother was a botanist and father was a scientist. So she knew enough to know what to eat and not eat and to follow the river. But I wondered what would happen if it was in the 70s, and that was in the 70s. What if it was in North Carolina? Right. What if that little girl didn't have any survival skills?
Right.
What would she do? And that was where the story started.
Wow. So are you always like when you're going about your daily routine, always looking at everything when you're in a doctor's office or the supermarket or wherever you are, you're always looking at things and thinking that could be a story, that could be a book?
Shelley, everything. I'm looking at everything. And if anything, I always say this, if anything gives me that like prickle down my head or neck, I ignore it. I'm ignoring it at my own creative peril because there is probably something really interesting in there.
Huh. So I'm just curious, like, are there any to read in 2025? What could you recommend to us?
Ooh, in 2025?
Yeah, recent.
So much good. Yeah, so much good stuff. I am reading constantly between advanced reader copies for Blurb. I'm part of 4 authors who do Friends and Fiction, and we interview authors. So I can tell you 2 great books out today. Lisa Scottolini has a new book out today, and we all love Lisa Scottolini. Yep, The Unraveling of Julia. And Joe Piazza has a really funny whodunit kind of thriller about tradwives. And I think it's called Don't Lie to Me. Don't Lie to Me? I think that's what it's called.
Okay.
And then the books I have loved this season, of course, my co-host, Kristen Harmel has The
Yeah.
Stolen Life of Colette Marceau. Christy Woodson Harvey has Beach House Rules. On a much heavier side, not a light beach read, Adam Ross has a book called Playworld that is an astounding novel. It was the New York Times book club pick, and it's set in the 1970s in New York City, a child actor. It's definitely heavier, but my God, the writing is just absolutely beautiful. Oh gosh, so many. I'll be quiet now.
So do you give yourself, I'm just curious, this is not on my list of questions, but do you give yourself a certain amount of time? Like if I can't pull this book together in 2 years, I'm moving on to something else. Is that not the way you work?
No, I think I've abandoned some projects, but they're usually a couple months in when I
Right.
realize I don't have enough juice for the story. But one time that turned into an Audible original. I was writing a book. I thought I was going to write a book about Florence Nightingale. I used to be a nurse. I was a nurse before I decided
Oh, I
to.
didn't know that. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a pediatric clinical nurse
Hmm.
specialist. And so I thought, I'm going to write a novel about Florence Nightingale. And I got, I don't know, 25,000 words in and thought, well, this was the interesting part for me. I mean, her whole life is interesting. Her
Right.
biographies are, there's like 5 of them and they're that thick. I own them all. But I had written about the part that really jazzed me. And it was when she bucked society and snuck off and went to nursing school. And so that part was the interesting part to me. And I didn't want to write the rest of the novel. So it is actually an Audible original story called Wild Swan. And
Wow.
it's read by Cynthia Erivo.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yep.
And I researched you and I did not see that. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I usually know within a couple months if a story doesn't have.
gonna work. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never, not saying it wouldn't happen, but I haven't spent years on something I abandoned.
Yeah.
I've spent years on something that I pivot, but haven't abandoned.
Right. So finally, I just have to ask you, is there any talk of this being made into a film? I need to ask that too.
They flirt, they call,
Yeah.
nothing so far. Yeah. They're like bad
I think
boyfriends.
so.
Hollywood's like,
I
the
know.
bad flirty boyfriend who never comes through.
This seems like it would be perfect, but
I
anyway, yeah. The Girlfriend is all about female friendship. And so I just wanted my final question to be like, what do you like to do with your girlfriends for fun?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. So that's such a great question because next week, my 3 college best friends are meeting me up in the mountains. And we will talk about our families and the books we're reading, and we'll go hiking and we will laugh our heads off and we'll cook and we will reconnect. And it could be a year before we all see each other. And it's just like yesterday.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so nice to have girlfriends no matter
Who
what.
knew you for like
Yeah.
all 3 of them met me when I was 17. And
Wow.
I am 61. So it's just right to know all the pieces of me, good, bad, ugly, and fun. It's really, they saw me in nursing school. They knew me when I was up all night working night shift. They knew me when I met my husband, right? So those kind of friends, it's so great to get together and honestly talk about the things that matter.
How was it to turn 60? I just have to ask.
You know, I I thought I'd have a hard time with it, but I am
Was it?
doing everything I love. I mean, what more do I want? I'm literally doing everything I love.
That's great to hear. All right. So, everybody, as you know, The Story She Left Behind is our book club pick for July. Thank you, Patti, so much for joining us. I just have to tell everybody, please stay on the Girlfriend Book Club page because I'm going to be posting some conversation starters so that you guys can talk about what you loved about the book amongst yourselves. And a reminder that our book club pick for next month is the book club for Troublesome Women by Marie Bostwick.
Okay.
And our book club pick for September is My Friends by Frederick Bachman. And the authors will be joining us the third Tuesday of each of those months at 7:30 p.m. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you,
Wait, I
Patti.
have to tell you something.
Yeah.
I interviewed Frederick Bachman live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I think there's
Really?
a video of it. Yes.
I'll have to look that up.
For Midtown Reader, which is a bookstore in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, well, he'll be joining us in
Actually,
September, which is quite a
yeah.
big get,
Tell
I think.
him Patty said hello.
I will. Okay. Thank you, Patty. Good night, everybody. Have a great
Good
evening.
night,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.